Forsaken by the Alpha I Loved. A Werewolf Shifter Romance Audiobook. Written by Rain Hart. Chapter 1. The Girl Who Vanished. It was the scent of blood that led him to her. Julian Hart had walked this path 100 times, boots soft in the pine needle hush of Winmouth Ridge's forest line. This morning should have been like any other, quiet, dew-heavy, the earth still breathing out the last of the night's chill. But the sharp tang hit him the moment he passed the first birch tree. Cuppery. Wrong. He paused, scanning the undergrowth, heart knocking once, then twice harder. The townsfolk joked he had the nose of a wolf, and maybe it wasn't all wrong. He took another step, then another, and saw the shape in the grass. She lay curled on her side, one arm outstretched as if reaching for something unseen. Her hair clung in damp strands to her face, and her clothes were torn at the shoulder, soaked through with mud and a marbled stain that darkened the fabric. But what arrested him most, more than the blood, more than the bruises, was the way her chest barely moved. Julian dropped to his knees beside her. Hey, can you hear me? Nothing. Only the whisper of her breath, ragged, shallow. He pressed 2 fingers to the side of her neck, pulse faint but present. Relief stirred, sharp and immediate. Okay, you're alive, he murmured. His voice softened, not wanting to startle her if she was somewhere between consciousness and nightmare. Let's get you out of here. As he gathered her carefully into his arms, he realized her skin was burning. And just beneath the surface, something else, something primal and wrong, coiled like a warning in the back of his mind. The clinic was quiet when he carried her through the back door. Winmouth Ridge had 1 doctor, 2 nurses, and Julian, its only full-time veterinarian, who often treated people's pets better than most humans. But today, his patient was neither beast nor fully ordinary woman. He laid her on the padded exam table, brushed a wet lock from her face, and finally saw her fully. She was beautiful in the most fragile, haunted way. Her cheekbone was split by a fading bruise, and a healing gash ran along her collarbone. But it was her scent, he hadn't noticed it in the panic, that stopped him cold. Faint, but unmistakable. Wolf. Julian's stomach dropped. He stepped back and scrubbed a hand over his jaw. Shit. She wasn't just hurt. She was one of them. A shifter. And judging by the lingering aura of a scent that wasn't hers, fiercer, dominant, possessive, she was bonded. Or had been. But something was off. He moved to sterilize the wound, his hands steady even as questions raced through his head. Why was she here alone? Who had done this to her? And why was her bond signature flickering like a half-dead star? He didn't hear the door open. I smelled her from the forest, said a low, crackling voice behind him. Julian turned. Cora Main stood in the doorway like the woods had birthed her whole. Her silver braid lay over one shoulder, her shawl damp with morning mist. She stepped inside without waiting for permission. Don't look at me like that, boy, she muttered, eyes falling to the unconscious woman. She didn't just wander into your clinic by accident. Julian frowned. You know her? Cora said nothing at first. She moved to the exam table, her fingers hovering above the girl's forehead without touching. Her expression shifted, something between recognition and pain. Omega, she whispered. Julian blinked. You're sure? Cora gave him a look. Do you think I've forgotten what that feels like? She inhaled slowly, then flinched. Bond imprint, but frayed. Her scent is twisted with another's. Not just mating, she was marked. Claimed. But something went wrong. Very wrong. Julian's throat tightened. Can she be helped? Cora's gaze flicked up to his, hard and clear. That depends. On how deep the wound is. And I don't mean the one you can stitch. That night, the storm came. Rain battered the windows of the small room Julian had prepared for her upstairs, tucked in the loft above the clinic. He hadn't left her side except to eat. Cora had gone silent, retreating into the woods as she always did, unpredictable, cryptic, but never wrong. Lightning cracked through the dark and Calla Rivenhart dreamed of teeth. In her dream, it was raining too. The woods were slick beneath her bare feet, branches tearing at her arms as she ran. Her breath came in sobs. She didn't know where she was going, only away. Away from the howl she'd heard moments ago, too close. From the silver in his eyes when he'd found her. From the way her body had betrayed her. "Kala," he had said, voice rough with fury and something deeper, more dangerous. She didn't turn. Couldn't. But he caught her. The memory cracked like thunder, his arms around her, her scream muffled against his chest, the heat of him everywhere. She remembered the press of his lips to her throat, his teeth scraping skin not to hurt, but to claim. And then, blood. She woke choking on it. Her hand flew to her neck, chest heaving as the dream's echo rang through her. She was in a bed. Sheets. Clean. Her clothes had been changed. Her wounds. Still there, but bandaged. Still aching, but real. Kala curled her knees to her chest, trembling. She didn't cry. Not aloud. But the sob that lodged in her throat made her whole body shake. She pressed her face to the pillow, muffling the sound. She had no words for what she'd seen, what she'd remembered. Only that it had happened. And that even now, something inside her still reached for him. Even after everything. Especially after everything. Downstairs, Julian sat at his desk, listening. He heard no footsteps. No screams. But in the quiet between rain and wind, he heard the broken sound of someone trying not to be heard. And he knew, without understanding how, that the girl upstairs wasn't just hiding. She was running. And whoever she was running from was already coming. Chapter 2: The Scar Beneath Her Skin. The first morning she woke without trembling, Kala noticed the silence. Not the absence of noise. There were birdsong and wind brushing through the trees beyond the window, but a deeper stillness, like the world had not yet decided whether it wanted her to belong to it. She sat up in bed slowly, arms curling around her knees. The pain in her body had faded to a dull ache, but something in her chest was still raw. It pulsed like a second heartbeat, reminding her that though she had left him, some part of her was still not hers. She touched the inside of her wrist where skin had once blistered from the heat of another's mark. The scar had faded. The memory hadn't. Downstairs, she could hear Julian's movements, quiet, careful, always just at the edge of her awareness. He didn't ask her questions. Didn't press for her name. Only offered tea, warmth, and silence. That was what unnerved her most. Kindness. She rose, washed slowly, and dressed in borrowed clothes that didn't cling. The fabric was soft. Human. There was no leather, no scent-coated seams, no territorial signatures embedded in thread. Just flannel and cotton, unscented. When she emerged into the sunlight of the kitchen, Julian didn't look surprised. He was leaning over the stove, sleeves rolled to the elbow, stirring something that smelled faintly of rosemary and broth. He glanced at her, then down again, graciously giving her the choice of speaking first. "I'm better," she said, the words dry from disuse. He smiled faintly. "You look it." She moved like an animal not yet sure of the cage. Her eyes darted to the door, the window, the coat rack. Escape routes. He didn't comment. "You hungry?" Kala nodded once. He placed a bowl before her without ceremony, then returned to his tea, letting her eat in silence. The food was simple, barley and vegetables, but warm and grounding. It made her throat burn. She hated how good it tasted. Later, when the sun had climbed above the ridge and the frost had melted off the porch, Julian asked, "Want to go into town?" Kala stiffened. "Not far," he added gently. "Just the weekend market. Fresh air. Real people. You don't have to talk to anyone." She hesitated. She didn't want to see anyone. Didn't want to be seen. But something in her stirred, the piece that wanted to believe she could pretend, just for an hour, that she belonged to this world again. "I don't have money," she said. Julian tilted his head. "Good thing you're not the one buying." Winmouth Ridge's market was built in a circle, like most old towns shaped by memory rather than logic. Wooden booths with slanted roofs line the square, and vendors called greetings to familiar faces while children raced between stalls sticky with honeyed apples and pine dust. Calla moved close to Julian, not touching, but drawn to the certainty in his posture. She kept her head down, hoodie up. Everything smelled wrong. Too sweet. Too sharp. Too much. The scents hit her like blows, spices, old paper, varnish, bodies. She flinched when someone passed too close wearing a perfume that burned like silver. It wasn't the scent itself, but what lay beneath it. A trace of something dominant. Something male. Her lungs seized. The world tilted. She reached out blindly, hand catching Julian's arm. "Hey, Calla." He turned instantly, brows knitting in concern. "Are you okay?" She realized he'd said her name, and she hadn't even given it to him. He must have heard it in the night. Her throat worked. "Sorry. Just too much." Julian stepped in front of her, shielding her from the crowd with his body. "We're going back. Come on." She didn't argue. The scent had vanished as quickly as it came, but the damage had been done. The scar had burned beneath her skin. That evening, Calla sat curled on the porch steps, arms wrapped around her knees, watching the sky bleed into dusk. Cora appeared like smoke beside her, silent until the air shifted and Calla looked up. "I know that look," the old wolf said. Calla said nothing. Cora lowered herself onto the step with a sound that might have been a groan or a growl. The body remembers what the mind can't bear. But it also knows when something's coming. Calla's fingers tightened. "You feel it too?" Cora nodded, silver braid catching the last light of day. "There's a storm building. Not wind. Not rain. Him." A tremor ran down Calla's spine. Cora turned to look at her, voice softer now. "Alpha. Close." "When you knew." Calla's voice broke before it left her mouth. "Ronan?" The name was a curse and a prayer all at once. Cora's silence was answer enough. "I left him," Calla whispered. "I ran. I broke the bond." Cora's eyes were sharp in the gloom. "Did you? Or did you just bury it deep enough that you couldn't feel it anymore?" Calla closed her eyes. Inside her chest, something throbbed. A pulse that wasn't entirely hers. When she climbed into bed that night, Julian had left a cup of tea on the table beside her pillow. It was still warm. There was a note folded beneath the mug. Just one sentence, in careful, blocky handwriting. "You don't have to talk. But you can." Calla stared at it for a long time. She didn't cry. But for the first time since she'd run, she let herself believe. Maybe someone could be kind without wanting to keep her. Maybe someone could stay without trying to cage her. But even as she closed her eyes, she felt it. Like a howl rising behind the mountains. Something had found her scent. And it was coming home. Chapter 3: The Alpha Who Waits in the Dark. He tasted her on the wind. It was faint, so faint that any lesser wolf might have missed it. But Ronan Valere was no lesser wolf. He stood at the edge of the forest, boots sunk into the loam, the trees breathing around him like old gods. His coat hung open, damp from the mountain mist, but the cold didn't reach him. Not here. Not with that scent lingering in the air. Calla. She was close. Closer than she had been in over a year. Ronan closed his eyes, let the wind thread through the black strands of his hair. She wasn't just close, she was weakening. Her scent was unstable, fading and flaring like a dying fire. It sent something feral twisting through his gut. "She's here," he said quietly. Behind him, 3 of his sentries flinched. They knew better than to question him, but still one spoke. "Alpha, are you sure? This far out?" "She wouldn't." "I said she's here." His voice was soft. Dangerous. Like velvet just before it burns. The wind shifted again, and with it came a taste of blood. Not hers. Human. Dear. Old. But below it, a single thread of something he would know anywhere, wild honey and dying roses. The scent she wore when she wasn't trying to hide. "Calla." He opened his eyes. "Lock the ridge line," he ordered. "No one goes in or out of Winmouth without my word." "Even humans?" another guard asked, uneasy. Ronan didn't look at him. Especially humans. Thorn Hollow was colder than he remembered. The ancient stone of the council hall loomed against the gray sky, ivy clawing up its bones like the dead weren't done yet. Fires burned low in the hearths inside, but they did little to chase away the chill. It wasn't just the air, it was the place. It had begun to rot from the inside the moment she left. And they all knew it. The moment he stepped into the chamber, conversation stopped. A semicircle of alphas sat in worn thrones carved from ironwood. Age had weathered most of them, but the sharpness in their eyes was undulled. And among them, leaning casually against a pillar like he belonged to a different story altogether, stood Varek Alden. Broad, smug, and sharp as broken glass. "Ronan," Varek drawled. "You've been out sniffing the trees again, haven't you?" Ronan didn't answer. He moved to the center of the circle, his boots echoing on the stone. "I smell her," he said. "The Omega." Murmurs rippled. "She's crossed the outer border." "She's hiding." One of the elders leaned forward. "And you intend to bring her back?" "Yes." Another scoffed. "After all this time?" "She broke the bond." "Let her be." "She didn't break it." Ronan's voice dropped, colder now. "She ran from it." "There's a difference." Varek chuckled, the sound like bone on marble. "Some might say she ran for good reason." Ronan turned toward him slowly. "You want to say that to me directly?" Varek pushed off the pillar. "Fine. I will. You let her go too easily, Valere. You let an Omega slip through your hands, and now the council questions whether you still have the strength to lead." Ronan's eyes darkened. "You've been whispering to them." Varek's smile widened. "I don't need to whisper. You're doing it all yourself." The tension in the chamber was a live wire. A younger alpha shifted uncomfortably. "Enough. This council isn't here to arbitrate personal grievances." Varek's gaze never left Ronan's. "But it is here to protect the laws. And the law says an unbound Omega." "She is not unbound." Ronan's voice cracked through the hall like a whip. "She is mine." Silence fell. Not a single wolf in the room breathed. And then, slowly, deliberately, Ronan let it slip. A thread of his scent. Power laced through the room like a shadow descending. Not just strength, but something deeper. Older. Dominance layered with grief. Desire sharpened to a blade. Two elders flinched. One turned pale. And Varek stepped back. Just once. Then he grinned. "So the wolf still has teeth. Good. We'll see how long they stay sharp." That night, Ronan didn't sleep. He stood at the edge of the tree line again, staring down into the lights of the human town below. They shimmered through the mist, warm and careless. Somewhere beyond them, she was breathing. Somewhere beyond them, she had built a world without him in it. He could almost see her, amber eyes dimmed by moonlight, jaw tilted as if in challenge. Her scent tugged at something deep in him, something not even the alpha could control. He didn't know whether he wanted to kiss her or kill whatever had kept her away so long. "I know you're here," he whispered. The forest said nothing, but the bond pulsed faintly in his chest. And for the first time in months, he felt her heartbeat echo his. Not full, not whole, but present. Ronan let the wind wrap around him. His muscles coiled. A low growl built in his throat and never quite escaped. His hands curled into fists. "You ran," he thought. "You broke me when you left. But I'm still yours. And I'm coming." Chapter 4. The First Collision. The book in Kala's hands trembled. It was a hardcover. Old. The kind of book whose spine had softened with time, its pages feathered at the edges. A poetry collection tucked into the back corner of a used bookshop with more dust than customers. She hadn't come looking for anything in particular, only the hush. Only the illusion of safety. But her fingers would not still. Something in the air had shifted. Not suddenly, not sharply. Like a tide had begun to rise slowly around her, lapping at the edge of her senses. The dust and ink of the store could not hide it. It slid under her skin like heat, like memory. No. She turned to put the book away, but her limbs had grown slow, and her breath was no longer hers. The door behind her opened, the chime overhead echoing like a distant bell from another life. Calla froze. She didn't need to turn. Every part of her already knew. The air thickened. The scent curled around her like smoke, salt and rain and something deeper, darker. Alpha. Hers. Ronan. He was behind her. Not touching. Not speaking. But her body reacted before her mind could catch up. Her heart pounded high in her throat. Her knees wanted to buckle. Her skin flushed, and it wasn't fear. Not only. It was recognition. She turned slowly. And there he was. Ronan Valere. Taller than she remembered, or perhaps simply more impossible. His coat still damp from the fog outside, silver eyes fixed on her like he'd walked through fire and expected her to carry the burn. He didn't move. Neither did she. The shop disappeared around them. The shelves faded, the books silenced. Only the bond roared like a storm caught between their ribs. Calla, he said, low and soft and devastating. Her name in his mouth was not a question. It was possession and mourning and hunger all at once. She staggered back a step. Don't, she said, her voice a breath, a crack. Ronan took one step forward. That was all it took. The scent hit her like a wave breaking, drowning her senses. Her knees gave out. Her vision blurred. Her body remembered things her mind had tried to erase. The weight of him, the voice in her ear, the bond that never died. Her hand shot out to the shelf to steady herself. Ronan stopped cold. Something flickered in his eyes, shock, maybe. Regret. Or worse, hope. Calla turned and ran. She shoved through the door and burst into the street. The wind hit her face, slicing her wide open. She gasped. Her body was on fire, every nerve alight with the echo of him. Not again. She ran across the cobbled street, past the butcher's stand, past the cafe, past the sound of her name again, Calla, called out not in that gravel-laced alpha voice, but another. Julian. She nearly collided with him at the edge of the market square. He caught her by the shoulders. Hey, what happened? She couldn't breathe. I can't, he found me. Julian's face sharpened instantly. Who? She gripped his coat like it was the only thing anchoring her to the world. Her nails dug into the fabric, her eyes wide, wild. He found me. She didn't have to say the name. Julian wasn't stupid. Come on, he said, gently but firm, pulling her back toward the clinic. Let's get you out of sight. They sat on the examination table like old friends and strangers. Julian handed her a wet cloth for her face. She didn't take it right away. Her hands were trembling too badly. He placed it against her cheek himself, softly, and she flinched, not from the touch, but from how kind it was. He didn't touch me, she said, as if needing to clarify. He just looked. That was enough, Julian replied. Calla laughed, brittle. Yeah, it always was. She stared down at her lap. Her fingers had curled into claws. I thought if I just stayed quiet long enough, didn't breathe too hard, didn't dream, I could fool the bond. Like it would die without sunlight. Julian didn't answer. Her voice cracked. But it didn't. It just went quiet. And now he's here, and it's screaming. Julian leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. You don't owe him anything, Calla. I know that, she whispered. My body doesn't. That night, she didn't sleep. She stood at the attic window, watching the fog creep in from the trees. The town below lay in peaceful hush. But she knew. Somewhere, he was watching too. Not hunting. Not yet. Waiting. The bond pulsed in her chest like a bruise pressed from the inside. She touched her neck. No mark remained. But she remembered the heat of his breath there. Calla, he had said. Like it still belonged to him. And the worst part? For one shattering moment, she had wanted it too. Chapter 5. The Smell of Memory. The night folded over Winmouth Ridge like a velvet shroud, thick with silence and the scent of wet leaves. From the rooftop of Julian's house, the stars blinked faintly through a veil of cloud, offering no guidance, no peace. Calla couldn't sleep. Not truly. She had slipped away from her room after the third time she woke gasping, her sheets damp with sweat and the ghost of a scent she could not scrub from her skin. Julian had said nothing when he passed her heading up the stairs, only left a folded blanket and a mug of tea at the landing. Now she sat on the tiles above the world, knees tucked to her chest, staring out over the trees like she could see the edge of herself in them. But the scent lingered. Not tea. Not autumn. Him. She pressed her hands to her face, but it was too late. Her mind had already peeled back the walls she'd built. And memory, unwelcome and precise, swept through her like a tide. Rain, hard and cold. Wind that howled like wolves mourning their dead. The night of the marking ceremony had been carved into her bones, not just her memory. She had been dressed in ceremonial white, barefoot, trembling, the hem of her gown soaked in mud and moonlight. Ronan had stood at the edge of the glade, bare-chested, eyes glowing silver, his hair reins slicked against his forehead. The air had smelled of petrichor and blood. And dominance. So much of it, she could barely breathe. Even before he moved, she had felt it, a magnetic pull that struck her behind the ribs, dragging her forward with a force older than language. Ronan hadn't spoken. He had reached for her with the same reverence a storm gives the earth before it splits it open. And she hadn't run. Not that night. She remembered the moment his scent saturated the air, thick and sweet and burning. Her knees had buckled. Her lungs refused to expand. Her vision blurred at the edges. Omega instinct. Overdrive. Every cell in her body screaming mate, mate, mate. And still, she had knelt. Not out of surrender. Out of survival. The pressure of his presence was overwhelming. A tidal wave of energy swirled around him, laced with unspoken need and something raw, fear. Not of her. Of himself. His hands had trembled when they touched her jaw. "I'm not going to hurt you," he had murmured, so low it barely reached through the storm. But his scent betrayed him. He was losing control. And when his mouth brushed her throat, just once, just a promise, not yet a bite, her breath stopped altogether. "You're mine," he had whispered. And the bond had flared to life. Calla woke with a choked cry, her nails digging into the tile. The stars had shifted. Her body was slick with sweat again, her chest heaving, her heart a runaway drum. She curled forward on the rooftop, pressing her forehead to her knees. She didn't cry, but something inside her fractured all over again. She felt it in her blood, that tether, frayed but unbroken. A thread that pulsed faintly under her skin, drawing her in the direction of the forest like it remembered a map she'd torn apart. She hated how alive it still was. She hated how much she wanted it gone. "You can't kill it," came a voice behind her. Calla spun, but the figure stepping through the rooftop hatch didn't startle her. Cora. She wore no shoes. Her braids shimmered like moonlight caught in wire. Calla swallowed hard. "I'm fine." Cora sat beside her without ceremony. "You're lying." A pause. Calla whispered, "It won't stop." "The memory?" Calla nodded. "The scent. The feel of it. It lives in me like a second breath." Cora looked at her with eyes older than time. "That's because it is." Calla flinched. Cora's voice gentled. "The mate bond isn't just a thread between bodies. It's one between instincts. Between truths. You can run from him. You can even silence it for a time. But you can't undo what your soul agreed to." Calla clenched her jaw. "So what? I'm his now, no matter what he did? No matter what I wanted?" Cora reached out, brushed a thumb gently over Calla's wrist, over the faded mark of a bond that never fully took. "You're not his," she said. "But part of you knows him. Echoes him. That's what you're feeling. Not obedience. Not possession. Just the part of you that still remembers what you shared. And hasn't found a way to bury it." Calla stared at the sky. "Then what am I supposed to do?" Cora's gaze drifted outward. "Stop trying to forget. Start trying to face it." Calla whispered, "It'll destroy me." Cora stood, slow and steady. "No. Avoiding it will." She vanished back down the hatch like smoke. Calla stayed until the moon bled into dawn. She didn't sleep. But when she finally stood, stretched her aching limbs, and walked back into the house, there was a steadiness in her breath she hadn't felt in days. It wasn't peace, but it was the beginning of war. And this time, she wasn't going to run from it. Chapter 6: The Alpha's Ultimatum. It was the silence that woke her. Calla had grown used to the soft creak of floorboards above Julian's study, the gentle hush of wind against the glass, even the occasional bark from the neighbor's golden retriever who hated squirrels more than sin. But this morning, there was only stillness. Stillness and the sharp prickle of instinct on the back of her neck. She threw off the blanket and crossed to the window in 2 silent steps. He was there. Ronan Valere stood just beyond the garden gate, tall and motionless, his black coat cut against the morning fog like a blade. Behind him, the trees swayed in reverence or fear, Calla couldn't tell. His eyes were fixed on the door. He'd come for her. "Stay inside," Julian said, already halfway to the threshold. Calla didn't listen. She followed him, barefoot and breathless, pulse drumming in her throat. The air beyond the door tasted of pine, metal, and pressure, an invisible wall of scent that curled like heat under her skin. Ronan didn't move when the door swung open. But something in his shoulders shifted. "Julian Hart," he said, voice like gravel and rain. Julian stepped outside, jaw tight. "You're trespassing. I'm not here for you." Calla stiffened. Julian didn't back down. "She doesn't want to see you." "She doesn't get to want yet," Ronan said. His words weren't cruel. They were quiet. And in that quiet was thunder. Calla took a step forward, her heartbeat so loud she barely heard Julian's warning whisper. Her feet touched the grass, damp with dew. And then Ronan looked at her. No words. No apology. Just that gaze, storm silver and searing. The air between them thickened instantly, a chemical wildfire that ignited every nerve in her body. "Calla," he said. Only her name. But it landed in her chest like a command she hated how deeply she heard. She straightened. "Leave. You know I won't." Julian stepped between them. "You heard her." That was the moment it changed. Ronan didn't growl. He didn't shout. But his scent broke over the lawn like a slow-burning fuse. Dominance, thick and honey-dark, saturated the air. Julian staggered back a step, breath hitching, his human body already submitting before his mind realized. "Stop it," Calla snapped, voice shaking. Don't you dare use that on him." Ronan blinked. The haze withdrew. "I wasn't trying to hurt him." Calla's voice rose, sharp with fury and shame. "But you did. You humiliated him. You humiliated me." He stepped forward once. "That wasn't my intent. You never mean to. You just do. You walk into people's lives like you own the ground under them, and when they flinch, you say it wasn't your fault. I came to bring you home." The word landed hard. "Home." She laughed, a sound that cracked and trembled. "There is no home, Ronan. Not anymore. You killed that the night you marked me. I didn't complete the bond. But you started it. You started it when I wasn't ready. You pushed, and I broke." His jaw flexed. Julian's breath came slower now, standing behind her but letting her speak. "I came here to forget what it felt like to not be able to breathe around you. And you think showing up and scenting down a human will make me crawl back? I don't want you to crawl." His voice was so low it almost vanished. She froze. "I want you to walk back." He took a breath, and something in him unraveled just slightly. The weight of months without her, of nights soaked in the taste of memory and the ache of an empty bond. He let her see it. Just for a moment. "I don't blame you for running," he said. "But I can't live without you." Calla's body betrayed her then. Her knees weakened, her vision swam. Not from his scent, but from the truth she'd refused to name. She still wanted him. Still ached. But want wasn't safety. Want wasn't freedom. "No," she whispered. "That's not enough." Ronan's eyes shuddered. "You should go," she said, louder now. "Before I forget why I ever left." He left. He didn't slam the gate or lash out. He simply turned and walked into the woods, coat trailing behind him like the shadow of a man who'd built a kingdom around one word: mate. Calla didn't watch him disappear. Julian came to her side. He didn't ask if she was all right, and for that, she was grateful. Later that night, when the house was asleep and the fire had burned to its final embers, Calla sat in the dark with her knees drawn to her chest. She could still feel the weight of Ronan's gaze in her bones. Still smell the ghost of his presence on her skin. And worse, she could feel the hollow space where his words had hit too close to truth. I don't blame you for running, but I can't live without you. She closed her eyes, and didn't know which part of that terrified her more. Chapter 7: A Kiss That Didn't Happen. The steam curled like ghosts over water. Calla stood at the edge of the natural spring nestled behind the ridge, arms crossed over her chest, the cool night air raising goosebumps on her bare skin. The path up the slope had been quiet, only the crunch of gravel beneath boots and the soft, steady murmur of Julian's voice as he talked about the constellations. She hadn't responded much, but she hadn't pulled away either. That was something. The warm mist rose in silver plumes, glowing faintly under the lantern Julian had set by the rocks. Ferns framed the water's edge, their tips damp with dew. The hot spring was shallow, carved into the stone like a secret the forest had forgotten. Julian shrugged off his jacket and rolled up his sleeves. It's not the ocean, he said with a smile, but it does the job. Calla gave a quiet, non-committal sound. It's tradition, he added. People around here come up to soak when life gets too loud. Sort of a human ritual. She tilted her head. So this is your idea of rebellion? He chuckled softly. This is my idea of normal. Calla looked away. She wanted normal. She really, truly did. But her body didn't understand what that meant anymore. They slipped into the water, side by side, the heat soaking through the tension in her muscles. Julian didn't touch her. He didn't crowd. His presence was warm, grounding. The scent of him, linen and rain, human and clean, didn't claw at her lungs the way alpha scent did. She could breathe beside him. That should have been enough. You don't have to keep running, you know, Julian said quietly, voice low with sincerity. You're safe here. Calla glanced at him. You keep saying that like it's true. It is. Her throat tightened. Then why doesn't my body believe it? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he shifted closer, just slightly, his shoulder brushing hers under the water. She didn't flinch. That surprised her. I know I'm not him, Julian said. She froze. He looked away. I know what you are, Calla. I've known since the first night. And I also know he's not done with you. Calla stared at the water's surface. Ripples spread out from her knees like the echo of a heartbeat. I'm not trying to fix you, Julian said. I just want to be near you while you find a way back to yourself. Her breath hitched. He turned to her then, close now, his hand rising slowly, brushing wet hair from her cheek. The moment held. Suspended. Fragile. His face tilted. Closer. She didn't move. And then his lips hovered near hers. The kiss never landed. Because before it could, the scent hit her like lightning. Not Julian's. Him. A thread of wind carried it, faint but unmistakable. Pine needles. Stormwater. Smoke and thunder and skin she once knew too well. Ronan. Her body stiffened instantly. Every nerve lit like a firework. She gasped. Julian drew back. Calla? She pushed away from him, stumbling as the water caught her knees. I can't, she stammered, scrambling from the spring, barely grabbing her shirt as she ran barefoot through the underbrush. She didn't stop running until she reached the tree line. The wind whispered across the ridge, cool against her damp skin. Her heart slammed in her chest, her hands still shaking. She turned slowly. And there, just at the edge of the woods, hidden in shadow but too present to ignore, Ronan stood. Not moving. Not approaching. Just watching. He didn't speak. Didn't make a sound. But the pull of him dragged at her gut, subtle as gravity, cruel as memory. The ache twisted in her belly. He hadn't left. He'd been here the whole time. Watching. Waiting. Her throat burned. "What do you want from me?" she whispered, though she knew he wouldn't answer. Not yet. She didn't wait for one. She turned, ran again, this time toward the house, toward Julian, toward anything that didn't smell like him. But all the way back, her body still hummed, not from the warmth of the spring or the brush of near kisses, but from a presence she never let go of, even when she tried. That night, in the bath, she scrubbed her skin until it burned. But the scent had never touched her. That was the worst part. It was inside. Not because he had marked her, but because her body remembered what it meant to be wanted. Truly, deeply, instinctively. And not even Julian's gentle hands could make her forget it. Chapter 8. The Howl Beneath the Moon. The moon rose like a wound. Silver bright and merciless, it painted the trees in a pale wash of hunger and heat. Winmouth Ridge had never felt so quiet, so distant from the world it nestled within. But Calla couldn't feel any of it, not the crisp wind, not the creak of forest limbs, not even the pulse of her own footsteps as she ran. She didn't know when she'd left the house. All she remembered was the heat in her veins, then the pressure behind her ribs, and then the ache. It started low, coiling just beneath her navel, sharp and dizzying, like someone had poured wildfire into her bloodstream. Her skin prickled. Her breath shortened. The scent of everything sharpened, grass, bark, the trace of her own sweat. And worse. Him. His scent wasn't here, not truly. But her body remembered. Her bond remembered. And under the full moon, that remembrance burned. She collapsed near the ravine, palms digging into cold dirt. Her knees buckled with no warning, her body trembling with the unbearable weight of imbalance. Her heat wasn't due, not for weeks. But this wasn't a normal Omega cycle. This was something else. The bond. The bond, frayed and broken, still throbbed faintly beneath her skin. And under the full moon, it howled. She gasped, clutching her chest. And then, she heard him. Soft footsteps. The air shifted. And with it came a scent that didn't belong to the forest. Ronan. He didn't touch her. Not at first. He stood several paces behind her, the scent of him unfurling slowly through the air. Not forceful. Not thick. Just present. Like he knew any more would drown her. "I felt you," he said, voice rough with restraint. Calla didn't look at him. Couldn't. "I didn't want this," she whispered, hands fisting in the grass. "I didn't want to need." "I know." His voice was closer now. Barely. Just enough. The scent of his control reached her first. It was strange, dominant, yes, but softened. Held in check by the way he paced his breath, the measured cadence of his presence. "You're unstable," he said quietly. "Your scent's unraveling." "No shit," she spat. Ronan crouched, still not touching. "Let me help." Her laugh came out strangled. "So you can finish what you started?" "I'm not here to take, Calla." She turned, furious. "You took the moment you pressed your mouth to my throat and called it mercy." His face twisted, pain flickering through it like wind over fire. "I wasn't myself that night. But you knew. You knew I couldn't breathe. And you didn't stop." Silence. Then, "I know," he said. 2 words. Carved from ash and apology. "I thought, if I could just claim you, it would anchor me. That it would fix the war inside me." Calla's breath hitched. "And instead," Ronan said, voice low, "I drowned us both." She wanted to scream. Wanted to claw the words off his tongue. But her body was already betraying her again. The scent of him calmed the wildfire in her bones, each inhale cooling the fever inch by inch. Not because of his dominance. Because of resonance. Because the bond was still there. She fell forward, catching herself on her hands. Her forehead touched the earth. Her breath stuttered. Ronan shifted closer, still not touching, but she could feel his heat. His control wrapped around her like a blanket pulled too tight. And then, he exhaled. The sound was soft. And with it came his scent, released deliberately this time. Measured. Gentle. It swept over her like a tide, not crushing but carrying. Calla whimpered. The ache dulled. The edge of the spiral broke. I'm not going to mark you, Ronan whispered, voice barely audible over the wind. I'm not even going to touch you unless you ask. Then why are you here? Her voice cracked. Because, he said, you still feel like home. She broke. Tears came, silent, shaking, swallowed by the moss and the moon. She hated him. She loved him. She would never stop wanting what she could never trust again. And yet, she let herself lean. Not into his arms, but into the space his body offered, close, warm, waiting. His hand hovered once, as if he might brush her shoulder. But he didn't. And somehow, the absence of touch burned more than skin ever could. When she woke the next morning, she was alone in the clearing. No scent lingered. No imprint in the soil. Only a blanket draped over her shoulders. His maybe? Or Cora's? She didn't know. But the ache was quieter now. Not gone. Just no longer screaming. Chapter 9, A Bond That Refuses to Die. The fire crackled low in Cora's hearth, casting long shadows across the floorboards, across Calla's bare knees, where she sat curled on the old she-wolf's woven rug. The scent of pine resin and dried lavender hung thick in the air, grounding and earthy, but it did nothing to settle the tight coil in her chest. Her head throbbed with the remnants of last night, the way the moonlight had torn her open, how her body had betrayed her, how Ronan's voice had wrapped around her in the dark like a lullaby laced with guilt. You've been dreaming again, Cora said, voice dry and deep. Calla nodded. She hadn't meant to. She hadn't wanted to. But her sleep was a frayed thing lately, barely tethered. Her dreams came like waves, memories half true, scent heavy, weighted with echoes. He was there, she murmured. Cora didn't ask who. She only poured the tea and passed the cup over, fingers gnarled with age, but still strong. I need it to stop, Calla whispered. I need to sever it. Cora said nothing for a long moment. Then she leaned forward, elbows resting on her knees, and gave Calla a look that sliced clean through the girl's defenses. You can't. Calla's chest went still. I have to, she said. It's ruining me. I can't think straight when he's near. I can't even breathe when I dream. I know. Cora's voice was softer now. Not pitying, just knowing. Calla shook her head. Other Omegas, when they break a bond, it fades. They heal. You're not like other Omegas. Calla froze. What does that mean? Cora took a long breath and exhaled it through her nose. It means your bond was never just physical. It was felt. Deeply. Received. And more importantly, mirrored. Calla stared. Cora, you're a sensing type Omega. Rare. Some say extinct. Her eyes glittered. You feel the bond on both ends. Not just as instinct, but as emotional tether. Most of your kind never survive a broken pairing. And if they do, she sipped her tea. They never walk clean of it. Calla's blood ran cold. So, I'm broken? Cora's lips curved faintly. No, you're alive. Which means it's still there. Frayed. Burning. Half-starved. But alive. Calla gritted her teeth. I don't want it to be. Cora nodded solemnly. I know. And she said nothing more. Meanwhile, miles away, in the hollow bones of the ruined stone hall, the wolves were gathering. They came in twos and threes, cloaked in furs and dominance, their scents thickening the air like storm clouds. The elders sat on stone thrones, cold-faced and watchful, as the one who now paced before them let his voice ring through the chamber. Varek Alden. His eyes burned amber under the torchlight. His grin was all teeth and arrogance. It's not just about the girl, he said, pacing, his boots echoing. It's about what she represents. The failure of leadership. The decay of law. One of the elders raised a brow. And what do you suggest we do about an unfinished bond? Reinstate the right of claiming, Varek said smoothly. She's unmarked. Untaken. She ran, yes, but the bond was never completed. Another grunted. It was initiated. That counts for something. But not for everything, Varek countered. Not until the blood's been mingled. until the mark is sealed. And under the old law, if an alpha fails to finalize the bond, his smile widened. Another can claim it. The room fell still. You would challenge Ronan Valere for the right to an Omega who is already chosen against him? A voice asked. Varek shrugged. I don't need her to choose. I just need her scent. Once I mark her, the bond realigns. It's law. A murmur rose. He raised a hand. And let's not pretend she wouldn't be better off. Ronan's a fractured alpha. Half mad. The bond's tearing him apart too. But me. He bared his teeth. I'll complete it. And she'll thank me. The elders exchanged looks. Silence, thick and shifting. Then one nodded. Varek turned from them and strode into the dark, cloak snapping behind him. A shadow detached from the pillar near the rear exit, a smaller wolf, cloaked and quiet. Go, Varek said. Find her. Watch her. Learn what makes her bend. The spy nodded once and vanished into the trees. Back in the quiet edge of the woods, Kala sat outside Cora's cabin long after the old she-wolf had gone back in. The fire had gone out. Her tea had cooled. But her hands were warm. Too warm. She pressed her fingers to her chest. It pulsed there. Not love. Not desire. Something older. Hungrier. Claim. And no matter how far she ran, it lived inside her still. Chapter 10: The Silent Touch. It began with heat. Not the kind that crackled between bodies. Not the warmth of blankets or the sleepy comfort of skin. This was deeper. Feral. Fevered. It crawled up Kala's spine like fire under her skin, and by the time Julian reached her side, her lips were cracked from panting and her limbs too heavy to move. Kala, he murmured, pressing a cold cloth to her forehead. You need to cool down. But she was already somewhere else. Far away. In the dream, it was raining again. Not the soft drizzle of Winmouth Ridge, but a storm that shook the world, thunder cracking above the sacred glade where everything had gone wrong. She stood at the edge of memory. Except this time, she wasn't the trembling girl in white. She was watching her. Watching him. Ronan. He stood in the clearing, bare-chested and soaking, his chest rising and falling with ragged force. His scent, dark and potent, poured from him, wild and aching. He looked like a creature on the edge of rupture. The other her knelt at the center of the circle, rain-soaked and gasping. But Kala's eyes stayed locked on him. And that's when she saw it. Ronan's eyes weren't wild with hunger. They were frantic. Pain bled from every line of his face. His hands curled into fists. His throat worked like he wanted to speak, but couldn't. Then he turned away sharply, staggered back, and bit himself. Kala's breath caught. He sank his own teeth into the flesh of his forearm, hard enough that blood mixed with rain. His body shook with the effort it took not to move forward. Not to touch her. Not to claim. The dream shifted. The memory bled. And the story cracked. He hadn't been attacking. He had been breaking. Holding back a bond that clawed at his ribs. Trying not to mark her. Trying. She woke with a soft sound, not quite a sob, not quite a gasp. The room was dark. Her skin was slick with sweat. Her hair clung to her neck in damp strands. And beside her, sitting on the chair he hadn't left in hours, Julian held her hand. Only one small oil lamp flickered, casting golden shadow across his features. His head was bowed, and when he looked up, the sorrow in his eyes nearly undid her. You said his name, he whispered. Her breath caught. Julian swallowed hard, and she saw it, how much he already knew. How much he'd suspected. But hearing it aloud, from her lips in sleep, it had broken something fragile. I'm sorry, she said, voice hoarse. You don't have to be, he murmured, even though his smile cracked with effort. I knew when I met you. You weren't just running from pain. You were running from someone who still had you. Kala looked away. He hurt you, Julian said. I don't forgive that. I never will. But what if he didn't mean to, she whispered, barely able to say it. Julian's breath caught. I saw something. In my dream. That night, he didn't push because he wanted to take. He pushed because he was losing to it. Because he thought if he just finished the bond, it would quiet the chaos. Julian stood slowly. His voice was soft, but it shook. Calla, is that enough for you? Is he didn't mean to enough to explain what it cost you? Her eyes burned. No, but it's enough to explain why it hurts so much. He turned to the window. Do you love him? She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Later, after Julian had left the room, his footsteps too even, too quiet to be natural, Calla lay back on her sheets, staring up at the ceiling. Her fever had broken, but her body still trembled with the ghost of what she'd seen. She remembered Ronan's mouth pressed to his own arm, the shake of his breath, the restraint, the rage not at her, but at himself. What if she'd only ever seen half the truth? What if what looked like force was failure? She turned her face into the pillow and whispered one word, not aloud, but into the space where scent still lingered in memory. Ronan. He didn't come. But in the forest, under the cover of moonlight, the alpha with silver eyes stood still against a tree, breathing in the wind like it carried her skin. He didn't sleep, didn't leave, didn't speak, because sometimes the loudest form of love is silence. Chapter 11, A Promise Made in Pain. The river whispered like it knew her name. It carved its way through the woods just beyond Cora's cabin, silver glass in the early dusk, catching the dying sun in broken gleams. Calla stood at the edge of the water, barefoot in the moss, her arms wrapped tight around herself as if that might hold her together. It didn't. She had come to be alone, to breathe. But his scent had already braided itself into the wind. She didn't have to turn to know he was there. Ronan. He didn't speak, didn't move. She felt him, though, like the hum of a storm just past the ridge. Controlled, but only just. His scent didn't claw at her this time. It hovered, careful, reverent, as if he was trying to apologize with air. She hated him for it. She hated how he made her body feel like a battleground, and her heart a thing that couldn't decide what survival even meant anymore. And more than anything, she hated that he still came when she broke. You follow me everywhere, she said, voice low and splintered. No answer. I ran, Ronan. Her voice cracked. I bled in the dark, hid in dirt, tore myself out of you. Still silence. She turned then. And he was exactly as she remembered him, towering, silver-eyed, sharp with sadness. The storm in him quieted, but never gone. You ruined me, she whispered. A muscle ticked in his jaw. And now, she said, stepping forward, trembling, you won't even leave. He bowed his head. Tension shimmered between them like heat off stone. She could feel her pulse in her wrists, her knees, her throat. I hate you, she breathed. He met her gaze. And then, slowly, deliberately, he dropped to his knees. Calla froze. Ronan didn't speak. His hands hung loose by his sides. He didn't reach for her. Didn't dare. I will never come closer than this, he said quietly. Not unless you ask. Tears pooled behind her lashes. You don't get to look like that, she choked out. You don't get to kneel like you didn't break me. His voice cracked on the edges. I did break you. Her shoulders shook. But I'm not here to take anything from you, he went on. Not your space. Not your air. Not your forgiveness. She stared down at him, breath stuttering. Then why are you here? She asked, voice raw. He raised his head. Because I still feel you in my blood, he said. And if I can't hold you, I'll guard you. Something in her chest split open. You don't understand, she whispered. Every time I smell you, I remember that night. I remember drowning. His face contorted. Pain. Regret. Want. All of it crashing behind his eyes. I know, he said. You bit yourself, she added, voice barely audible. I saw it. You tried to stop. But you still started. His gaze didn't flinch. Because I was weak. And selfish. And hurting in ways I didn't know how to name. She wrapped her arms tighter around herself. I didn't want to be your anchor. You weren't, he said. You were my light. Silence spun between them. Calla's breath caught. And then the tears came. Not quiet. Not pretty. They poured from her like they'd been waiting weeks for permission. She sank to the grass and screamed once into the earth, her voice echoing off the river's bend like a wounded thing. Ronan didn't move. Not even a twitch. And maybe that was what undid her most. He didn't rush. He didn't reach. He simply waited. Still on his knees. Still silent. Still hers, but no longer taking. The sun dipped lower, burning amber across the treetops. Kala sat with her head in her hands, her chest hollowed out and breath shallow. "You're really not going to come closer?" she asked, broken and sharp. Ronan exhaled. "Not unless you call me." She turned her head, looked at him fully. And there it was. Not the alpha. Not the dominance. Just a man, bent with grief and willing to crawl through it. For her. She didn't call him. Not yet. But she didn't leave. And neither did he. Later, long after darkness swallowed the river's shimmer and dew crept over the grass, Cora found her there, sitting by the water's edge, legs pulled to her chest. "You let him stay," Cora said, kneeling beside her. Kala nodded. "He didn't ask to." Cora smiled faintly. "The fiercest wolves are the ones who learn how to wait." Kala looked down at her palms, the skin raw from where her nails had dug in. "I don't forgive him," she whispered. "You don't have to," Cora said. "But the fact that you wanted to see what would happen if you didn't run this time?" She touched Kala's shoulder gently. "That means something." In the woods, Ronan didn't sleep. He didn't dream. But his body stayed rooted to the place her scent had been. And his vow burned quiet behind his ribs. "I won't move. Not 1 inch. Not unless she asks." Chapter 12, When the Body Betrays. It started with blood. Just a drop, bright against the white cotton of Julian's shirt, drawn from the gash along a young boy's temple. Kala pressed the cloth tighter, her hands steady, her breath calm. But underneath her skin, something was off. The boy whimpered, flinching as she leaned over him to whisper something comforting. She didn't realize how close her lips came to the hollow of his throat until his mother tensed. The scent in the room changed. Not the boy's. Not the blood. Hers. Sweet. Sharp. Wildly, unmistakably Omega. Kala froze. It pulsed from her in a wave, subtle but distinct, the body's language ancient and undeniable. Julian's head snapped up from where he'd been stitching an ankle sprain at the other table. His eyes found hers. And widened. Kala's heart thudded. She straightened too fast, nearly dropping the bloodied rag. The scent thickened, clinging to the warm walls of the clinic like dew on pine. I need air," she murmured and fled. Outside, the wind was sharp. She stumbled behind the clinic, pressing her back against the weathered wall, hand clutched to her chest. The evening sun painted the rooftops gold, but all she felt was heat, rising from her neck, her skin, her center. Her scent. It had never done that before. Not unless he was near. Not unless. "Kala?" Julian's voice was soft, but it still made her flinch. He stood in the doorway, sleeves rolled to the elbows, concern etched into every line of his face. She couldn't look at him. "You're not sick," he said gently. "Are you?" "No," her voice shook. "I don't think so." Julian stepped forward. Kala shrank back. That, more than the scent, made his expression shudder. "You were doing better," he whispered. "You've been sleeping. Smiling sometimes." I thought so too," she said. "Until my body decided otherwise." He nodded slowly. And then he asked the question she'd feared. "Is it him?" Kala closed her eyes. "Kala." "It's not him," she whispered. "It's me. It's something in me that never broke clean. Something that wakes up when it wants to." He stepped closer, so close now that his voice dropped to something vulnerable. "Does he still have you?" "No," she said. But it came too fast. Too desperate. "I can't hold what still belongs to someone else," Julian murmured. Her heart shattered. "You've never been someone else," she said. "You are safe. You are. But safety's not the same as being wanted, Kala." She looked at him, stunned. Julian's eyes were soft, but no longer blind. And that somehow hurt most of all. At the edge of town, Hidden in the brush beyond the eastern trail, a figure crouched low among the ferns. The spy had watched the whole exchange, watched the girl tremble, smelled the shift in her scent, the way it bloomed like spring after drought. The spy's lips curled into a satisfied smile. He drew a charcoal-stained scrap of parchment from his sleeve and scribbled quickly. She is scenting. Omega reaction confirmed. The mark is waking. The bond is alive. He rolled the note tight, tucked it into a leather tube, and whistled once. A hawk answered from the trees, diving to collect the message. By the time its wings vanished into the clouds, the spy was already gone. That night, Calla lay in bed and stared at the ceiling, skin flushed and heart slow but aching. She'd scrubbed her scent from her sheets, burned rosemary in the corner. But she still felt it. That pull, that hum, the shift. It had started. And this time, it wasn't him reaching for her. It was her body reaching back. Chapter 13, The Alpha and the Flame. The torches lining the walls of the Thorn Hollow Council chamber burned low, their orange light flickering against stone so ancient it had forgotten the names of the wolves who built it. Ronan stood at the center of the circle. Alone. Surrounded. His scent was iron and smoke, carefully leashed, though it bristled just beneath the surface. His silver eyes swept the chamber, measuring every elder, every rival. And finally, him. Varek Alden leaned lazily against one of the carved pillars, arms folded across his chest, golden hair shining like victory already tasted. His grin was a slow, curdled thing, blooming wider when Ronan turned toward him. The air tightened. This council recognizes Alpha Varek's petition, one of the elders announced, voice dry as cracked bark. You may state your claim. Varek pushed off the pillar. By law, he began, with the silky confidence of someone who had rehearsed this line in his mind 1,000 times, an Alpha may request reassignment of an Omega whose bond has not been fully consummated or finalized, especially in cases of abandonment, exile, or dereliction of protection. He glanced at Ronan, eyes gleaming. My claim is simple. The Omega in question, Calla Rivenheart, remains unmarked in full. Her bond to Alpha Valer was broken by force, with no closure, no right, no seal. And yet she is still biologically affected. He turned to the elders. That makes her vulnerable. And it makes him, he nodded toward Ronan, unfit to maintain the bond. The silence that followed was thick with tension and history. Ronan's voice, when it came, was a growl wrapped in velvet. You speak of law, Varek. But where were your principles when she ran, bloody and terrified, from the very chains that law gave me permission to wrap around her? A murmur rippled through the chamber. Ronan stepped forward. You call her unclaimed. I say she's free. That she clawed herself out of a fate she never chose. And now you want to offer her back to the same cage, with your scent instead of mine. You failed to protect her, Varek said smoothly. You lost control. You let her escape. And now she's feral, scenting in the open like prey. Ronan's control cracked. The scent that surged from him hit the chamber like thunder, deep, wild, alpha. The walls trembled with it. Elders flinched. A few stood. One grabbed the edge of his cloak as though to brace himself. But Ronan's rage wasn't just dominance, it was mourning. A scent that smelled of loss and battle and something wholly undone. She was never prey, he roared, voice vibrating through the bones of the room. She was the only thing that ever made me less of a monster. The entire hall went silent. One elder rose slowly. Enough. Ronan turned his head, eyes still blazing. You may be an alpha, the elder said, but this chamber will not be ruled by impulse. Ronan's shoulders heaved, chest rising and falling with uneven breath. And what will you rule by? He asked coldly. Varek's ambition? The scent of a bond that neither of you can feel the way I do. You speak as if feeling is law, another elder snapped. No, Ronan said, quieter now. But it should be. The chamber murmured again. We will consider the petition, came the voice from the throne. You are dismissed. Ronan left the council hall with every step echoing like the fall of a kingdom. He didn't return to the barracks, didn't seek out his men. He vanished into the shadows of the hollow's perimeter, where no scent clung and no voice followed. There, under a half-sick moon, he dropped to his knees in the clearing near the ruins of the old sanctuary. He tilted his head back and howled. The sound tore from his throat like grief wrapped in thunder, long, low, and raw. The kind of howl that shattered silence for miles. That warned. That wept. That begged. His claws sank into the dirt. The air around him pulsed with memory, her hair damp with forest mist, her voice when it broke, the way she flinched from his touch even when her scent reached for him. Ronan pressed his forehead to the earth. He had always believed strength was found in control. But now, it was in surrender. Far from Thorn Hollow, in the soft-lit town of Winmouth Ridge, Calla stirred in her sleep and whispered his name. Chapter 14, The Night of Tension. The night was not quiet. It breathed. Wind moved through the trees like a whisper slipping under skin, carrying the scent of pine, wet moss, and something sweeter, darker. Omega. Ronan smelled her before he saw her. His body went still. He was patrolling the outskirts of the woods just beyond Winmouth Ridge, as he had every night since the council hearing, his presence a silent promise in the dark. He had not crossed the line, had not hunted, had not spoken. But tonight, the bond tugged him like a hook through bone. He turned toward it and saw her. Calla, barefoot, sleepwalking. Her white nightgown fluttered like a ghost's veil, her skin glowing pale silver in the moonlight. She moved through the trees with no awareness of where she was going, but her body knew. Straight to him. No, through him. She didn't even see him. He stepped forward, hands trembling. Calla. She didn't respond. Her eyes were half-lidded, her breath shallow. And the scent, gods, the scent was everywhere. Her pheromones pulsed with rising heat, disoriented and desperate. The bond was in chaos. She was slipping. He couldn't wait. Ronan moved. He caught her just before she stepped into the deeper wild. Her body tensed in his arms, but didn't resist. Didn't wake. Calla, he whispered, voice low, trembling. She shivered. Her skin burned against his. Not like this, he murmured, pulling her gently against his chest. Not when you don't know you're reaching for me. She whimpered, so softly it shattered him. Her fingers curled into his shirt. Don't lose control. The edge of her thigh brushed his. Heat coiled between them. Her breath hitched, and her head fell against his shoulder. I love you, she whispered. Ronan closed his eyes. She was dreaming of him, and she didn't even know it. He carried her through the trees to the small boundary cabin Cora once used, abandoned, now, but still dry and safe. He laid her on the old cot, careful not to disturb the delicate balance of her scent. He turned to leave, but her hand reached for him. Don't go, she murmured, eyelids fluttering. I shouldn't stay. I don't care. He stayed. He sat on the floor beside the cot, his back against the wood frame, hands braced on his knees like they might hold back the instinct rising in him. She twisted in the blankets. Sweat glistened at her collarbone. And then she turned, her hand brushing his thigh. Her scent flared. Ronan's throat locked. She whimpered again, pressing her forehead to his chest. His arms folded around her before he could stop them. She fit there like she always had. Calla, he whispered against her hair, you're burning through me. Her voice came like a ghost through the dark. If you love me, let me go. Ronan's arms trembled. She didn't mean the forest. She meant everything. He exhaled against her temple, burying the ache. I love you, he said softly. Even if it kills me. And then he did the hardest thing of all. He held her. And didn't touch her. They stayed like that for hours. Her scent faded, but not fully. His desire never left, but it never moved. And the bond, wild and half awake, pulsed between them, simmering in a space where need did not become action, where devotion wore the shape of denial. In the morning, she would not remember everything. Only the scent of cedar. the heartbeat beneath her cheek. The soft rasp of a voice that said nothing she wanted, but everything she needed. Chapter 15. The Other Alpha Arrives. Winmouth Ridge had never held a town hall with this many people. The old chapel that doubled as the community meeting space now buzzed with whispers, scraping chairs, and a thick hum of unease that no one could name, but everyone felt. Calla sat in the back, her hands curled tight in her lap. Julian stood beside her, gaze sweeping the gathered crowd. He hadn't touched her since that night, though his every movement ached with the wish to do so. She hadn't spoken much, either. Not about the forest. Not about the man who found her sleepwalking and brought her back without a bruise. Not about how her body still tingled from a touch that never quite happened. Now, the whole town stirred with rumors. Another one was seen near the market, a woman said from the front. Tall. Dark coat. Didn't speak. They don't blink right, muttered a man from the corner. You ever notice that? Shifters. They don't blink like us. They don't breathe like us either, someone else added. Julian raised a hand to settle them. We don't know who they are, he said calmly. But yes, we've had reports. I suggest limiting movement after dark until we... The door opened. And he walked in. He moved like a man who'd never had to ask permission for a damn thing in his life. Broad shoulders in a fitted black coat. Jaw sharp enough to cut glass. And a presence that sucked the air from the room. Not loud. Not overt. But felt. Calla's breath caught in her throat. Julian went rigid beside her. The stranger scanned the room with cool detachment until his eyes found her. They paused. Flickered. Then curved into a smile that wasn't a smile at all. His name was never offered. Not to the humans. He introduced himself with practiced ease, his voice laced with false civility. Apologies. I'm passing through. Heard there was concern. Just wanted to assure the townsfolk I mean no harm. Calla didn't need his name. She knew the scent beneath the cologne. Varek. The predator wearing a gentleman's face. He left after 10 minutes, but the damage had been done. People murmured after him. Calla didn't move. Calla, Julian said gently. We need to talk. They walked behind the building, where the late sun slanted gold through the trees. The edge of autumn clung to the wind. You're changing, he said, voice low. She didn't deny it. He turned to her, eyes filled with that patient sorrow she couldn't bear. He's still in you, isn't he? The bond. The pull. Her lips parted, but no words came. Julian stepped back, not in anger, but in grief. I wanted to be enough. Her hands clenched. You were, she said hoarsely. You are. But that thing in me, it doesn't listen to reason. No, he said softly. It listens to him. That night, she walked alone near the tree line. The wind smelled strange. Too still. Too precise. Like someone had emptied the forest of scent and replaced it with something manufactured. Then movement. He stepped from the shadows like he'd been waiting for her. Like her feet had led her there on instinct alone. Varek. His coat was gone. He wore a fitted shirt rolled at the sleeves, his boots sinking into the damp earth as he approached. Calla, he said, voice like smoke over ice. She froze. He didn't rush. Didn't bare teeth. Didn't need to. He bowed his head, deeply. A formal alpha gesture. Ancient. Symbolic. She stiffened. I've come, he said, rising slowly, to take you home. There is no home, she said, voice brittle. Varek's lips curved. That's not what the law says. You were claimed, half-marked, and never released. And now, the council has granted me right of reassignment. Her stomach dropped. No, she whispered. Yes, he said. You may not want me, but you're owed. And by tradition, what one alpha abandons, another may claim. You don't want me, she snapped. You want what I represent. Power. Bloodline. Leverage. Varek didn't deny it. But his eyes flickered once to her mouth. Then her throat. Then back up. You smell like an omega in bloom, he said softly. Whatever he left inside you, it's waking. I belong to no one. You belong to the bond. He took a step closer. And then the air shifted. A new scent. Dark. ancient, like storm-soaked fur and iron. Ronan. Kala turned. He stood at the edge of the trees, eyes silver in the moonlight, his scent pouring low and furious through the clearing. Ronan didn't speak, but neither did he back down. Varric smiled like a man handed a gift. "Well," he murmured, "now it's a real reunion." Kala stood between them, between power offered by force and power surrendered by love. And her heart, traitor that it was, began to beat faster for the one who hadn't touched her once in days and yet made her body burn just by being near. Chapter 16. The Bond Awakens. The path to Muel Grove was overgrown, wild, and fragrant with dusk. Moss clung to every root like secrets left too long in silence. The canopy overhead closed in thick and green, filtering the last golden light into trembling fragments. Birds hushed. Air thickened. Kala's boots slipped on damp stone. She didn't complain. Cora led her in silence, her silver braids braided tight down her back, her gait surprisingly steady for a woman who looked carved from age and forest wisdom. She carried a satchel of herbs and a rusted tin flask. Her eyes, still unreadable, did not turn back once. Kala followed because something deeper than reason told her to. "You said it was just a spring," Kala murmured, voice soft as she ducked beneath a hanging vine. Cora's voice came like a breath across stone. "It's never just a spring." They came to it in twilight. A shallow basin cut into the stone, nestled in a cradle of ferns and twisted roots. The water shimmered faintly, not from any light above, but from something that pulsed beneath. The air buzzed faintly with energy, like a held breath. "This is the Bondwell," Cora said. "The water remembers. If you wish, it will show you what your body won't let go of." Kala swallowed. Her fingers trembled as she stepped forward. She knelt by the edge. The water was impossibly clear, so still it looked solid. Then her fingers broke the surface, and the world fell away. She stood barefoot in night. The scent of rain. A clearing, slick with mud. A body pressed to hers, not forceful, but shaking. Ronan. Not like she remembered. He wasn't above her. He was beside her. Knees in the dirt. Hands fisted in his own hair. His chest heaving like he couldn't breathe. She heard herself sobbing, but now she saw why. His mouth hovered inches from her throat. He never bit. His teeth were bared, snarling at nothing. At himself. And then Ronan bit his own forearm. Blood welled dark and fast. He shoved it between them, jaw locked, a low growl ripping from his throat like thunder. "I won't," he rasped. "I won't. You're not a thing to take. You're not a prize. You're you." She, her past self, was sobbing now, writhing in the grip of heat. And still, Ronan didn't move. She saw it, his pupils blown wide with restraint, the muscles of his jaw twitching from pain. His voice was hoarse with agony. "I love you too much to ruin you." Then the vision broke. Kala gasped, reeling backward from the pool like she'd been burned. She collapsed onto her side, chest heaving. The grove was silent. Cora waited. She didn't speak. She never did until the silence settled fully. Kala curled into herself and wept. Not from fear. Not from grief. But from understanding. Her chest cracked open under the weight of it. "I thought," her voice was raw, "I thought he took everything from me." Cora crouched beside her, her voice soft and old and knowing. "But he gave you the choice. Even when it broke him." Kala's eyes were wide, wet. He was in heat. And he stopped himself. Cora touched her shoulder. "No alpha walks away from that unless their love is stronger than instinct." Kala curled her hands into the moss. The forest smelled like him now. Like memory corrected. Like pain unspooled. Like a tether that had never really snapped, only frayed and tangled. She looked back to the spring, but the surface had gone still. There were no more answers. Only choices. And Kala finally felt the echo of her bond not as a prison, but as a heartbeat. Later, she stood at the edge of the grove as the stars broke through the trees. Her skin was cool with dew. her breath steady. The wind shifted, and she knew he was near. Not approaching, just waiting. She didn't need to see him to feel the ache of restraint that always came when Ronan Valere was within a mile of her skin. She didn't speak. She only whispered into the dark where she knew his ears waited. You weren't the monster. Silence. Then a breath. A shift of wind. A feeling. And a word carried so low she might have imagined it. I know. Chapter 17, A Human's Goodbye. The wind smelled of goodbye. It swept through the back garden of Julian's house, brushing over the last blooms of summer, stirring the white sheets hung out to dry. The cotton snapped faintly, like a distant clap of hands at the end of a quiet performance. Calla stood just outside the open door of the clinic. Her arms crossed tightly, but her shoulders betrayed her, sloped low, hunched inward. She stared at the suitcase by the gate as if it might speak first. Julian's coat was already buttoned. His hands hung at his sides, relaxed, but too still. I'm not leaving because I want to, he said gently, eyes never quite meeting hers. I'm leaving because I think you already left, Calla. A long time ago. Her breath hitched. I tried, she whispered. I tried to be yours. I know, Julian said, a small smile curving his lips. You tried to make me your future. But I think I was only ever a place for you to catch your breath. Calla looked down. The ache was sharp and shameful, like a thread pulled from under skin. I didn't mean to use you, she said, voice breaking. You didn't, Julian said firmly. You needed. And I gave. That's not use, Calla. That's loving someone who wasn't ready. He stepped closer, reached out, and for a moment, just a breath of a moment, he brushed her cheek with his knuckles. You made me believe in quiet again, he said softly. And I'll never be sorry for that. Calla blinked fast, but the tears escaped anyway. She stepped into him then, arms circling his waist like a ghost clinging to what it cannot keep. He held her with a tenderness that shattered more than anger ever could. You were gentle, she said into his chest. You showed me what it could be like. To be wanted without being consumed. Julian's voice was low. Then don't ever settle for anything less. They stood like that until the wind changed. Until the scent on it shifted, ever so faintly. Stormwater and cedar. The scent she couldn't escape. Calla looked up. Past Julian. And there he stood. Ronan. Half in shadow, beneath the iron arch at the edge of the garden path, as still as the statues in the old graveyard on the hill. His silver eyes held no triumph. No demand. Just reverence. Grief. Hope, layered like frost and fire. Julian turned slowly. They locked eyes, Alpha and man. No challenge. No threat. Only understanding. Julian nodded once. Take care of her, he said, his voice low but clear. And don't make her run again. Ronan's jaw tightened. He gave a small incline of his head. I never wanted her to run, he said, voice barely above a murmur. I only ever wanted her to stay, if she chose to. Julian gave a faint smile. Then maybe there's hope for you yet. Calla bit her lip as Julian stepped away. He picked up his suitcase. No backward glance. Because the kindest endings never needed one. Later, as dusk crept into the bones of the house, Calla stood alone in the garden. The silence tasted different now. Not empty. Just waiting. Ronan remained at the edge, not crossing the invisible line Julian had left behind. Why didn't you stop him? She asked finally. I owed him that, Ronan said. And me? Ronan's voice was a rustle of storm across stillness. You already stopped me. When you didn't say my name. Calla turned slowly. Their eyes met across that fragile breath of space. Something inside her twisted. Slowly. Quietly. Not pain. Not longing. Something stranger. Something that waited to become decision. She didn't move. Didn't speak. But she didn't leave either. And Ronan bowed his head, as if that was enough. For now. Chapter 18, The Challenge Declared. The stone ring beneath the great tree of Hollow had seen blood before. It was woven into its roots, into the carvings of wolves snarling on the inner bark, into the ceremonial etchings that flared faintly beneath the rising moon. But tonight, something colder than tradition settled in the air, something sharp, iron-edged, and aching. Calla stood at the edge of the ring, the eyes of the entire council trained on her like 100 sharpened teeth. Varric's voice echoed through the stone courtyard like a drumbeat, steady and deliberate. By ancient law, I declare a claim of rightful bond on the grounds of an incomplete mate mark. The Omega Calla Rivenheart bears it. Therefore, by right of our kind, I demand the Alpha challenge. He turned slightly, not to Calla, but to the council seated in crescent formation, cloaked in moss-colored robes, their expressions veiled beneath age and fear of change. My challenge is to Ronan Valere, he said, and his teeth flashed in a grin too white, too eager. For her. Ronan did not move at first. His silver eyes were half-lidded, hands clasped at his back. Stillness. Power restrained like a storm inside glass. But Calla felt the shift in his scent. He was burning. Then, slowly, Ronan stepped forward into the light of the council fire. His voice was low, hoarse with a fury kept barely contained. She is not yours to claim. She bears your mark, Varric said coolly. Incomplete. Unfulfilled. And you've had your chance. She ran. She chose neither mate nor pack. I didn't choose, Calla said sharply, her voice cutting clean through the circle. Every head turned. The council fell still. Calla stepped forward now, not toward Ronan, not toward Varric, but toward the ring of ancient law itself. Her amber eyes glowed with the fire she had buried for too long. I didn't choose, she said again, more clearly this time. Because no one ever told me I could. Ronan's chest rose, a sharp inhale that cracked through him like glass under pressure. Varric, on the other hand, only smiled wider. And you can. Now. The law is clear. If a bond is incomplete, the Omega must choose between the contenders. Or, he said, pausing for theatrical effect, we decide through combat. Calla's lip curled. Like I'm a prize at the end of a bloodied sword? That's what the old ways dictate, one of the elders croaked, not unkindly, but not helpfully either. And what if I refuse? Calla said, stepping directly into the stone ring, her voice shaking with fury and something older. What if I don't want either of them? What if I don't want to belong to any Alpha? Silence. The kind that echoed. One of the older female council members whispered, that isn't how the bond works, child. Calla spun toward her. No, that's how you say it works. But who wrote the law? Who sat here centuries ago and said the Alpha takes and the Omega bends? The wind moved through the boughs overhead. Somewhere, a branch creaked. And Ronan, still silent, knelt. Right there in the dirt. In front of her. His eyes never left hers. I don't want to take you, he said softly. I want to stand beside you. Calla froze. Even Varric's smirk slipped for a moment, faltering. She looked down at Ronan. At the man she had once thought would destroy her, and maybe almost did. And yet here he was, not asking, not pressing, just waiting. The High Elder rose now, his voice final. The challenge has been issued. Unless Calla Rivenheart names a mate before the next moonrise, the rite of Alpha Duel will proceed at dawn. No, Calla said. But they ignored her. Because they were wolves. And wolves obeyed the old ways. Even if they broke hearts to do it. Outside the council grounds, Calla walked fast, too fast, down the forested path. Ronan followed, but gave her space. She spun suddenly. You didn't have to kneel. I did, he said. Not for them. For you. I'm not something to be fought over. I know. I'm not a trophy. I know. She looked at him. Hard. But you'll fight him, won't you? Ronan's jaw clenched. Only if you don't say no. She hated how that broke something in her. You die for me? His voice was the whisper of claws against stone. I'd die if I couldn't love you. She slapped him then, not hard, not cruel. Just enough to crack something open between them. And she whispered, shaking, then don't. Don't die. Don't make me watch it happen. Ronan nodded once. But neither of them had a choice. Not anymore. The right was set. The dawn would come. And with it, blood. Chapter 19, The Night Before Blood. The old woods breathed like a living thing, sighing through the trees with a kind of sorrow that felt ancient. Twilight gathered in violet shadows, softening the forest's edges until even the path beneath Kala's boots felt like it might disappear at any step. She didn't knock. The cabin stood alone at the edge of the stream, half forgotten, cloaked in moss and moonlight, the roof bowed under years of wind. Smoke curled faintly from the chimney, mixing with the scent of pine and damp stone. Kala opened the creaking door and stepped into warmth. Ronan was there. Not armored. Not alpha. Just him. His broad frame rested in the worn chair near the hearth, sleeves rolled to his elbows, firelight licking at the shadows beneath his silver eyes. "I wasn't sure if you'd come," he said. She closed the door behind her. The click felt final. "I wasn't sure either," she whispered. They stood a moment in the hush between two heartbeats. The world outside was bracing for war. But in here, there was only silence and a bed. He nodded toward it, the mattress simple, clean, covered in heavy wool. "I set it up in case you didn't want to be alone." "I always want to be alone," she murmured. "But tonight you're not," he said gently. She moved without speaking, peeling off the outer layer of her coat, then her boots, each motion slow as breath. He didn't look away, but he didn't devour her either. His restraint coiled around him like a second skin. Kala slid into the bed, turning her back to him, fingers clenched in the thick blanket. She felt the mattress shift as he lay down beside her, close but not touching. The air changed. That subtle pressure she knew too well, the warm tide of his presence, his scent, wrapped around her like heat on bare skin. He wasn't touching her. Not 1 inch of skin against hers. And yet, it felt like his soul had wrapped around her body. She exhaled. Long shaking. And then her hand, trembling, reached back. Sought him blindly. Fingers found his wrist. His pulse. He stilled. "Kala." He breathed her name like it hurt. Her hand slid higher, grazing over his forearm until their palms pressed together. The feeling was devastating in its simplicity. No claws. No teeth. Just skin. Just warmth. Just him. Information flowed between them in the silence, the thrum of his heartbeat, the tremble in her breath. Their pheromones, low, longing, mingled without force. His scent wrapped around her like memory, cedar smoke, rain, and something sharp that always reminded her of stormlight. No one spoke. And that was the miracle. Because this wasn't seduction. It wasn't climax. It was something more dangerous, more honest. It was two souls lying side by side without armor, without deflection. Every breath was permission. Every inch of restraint was a confession. He turned his palm up, gently lacing their fingers. She let him. When her thumb swept over the ridge of his knuckle, he trembled. She rolled slowly onto her back. Not facing him. Not turning away. And he matched her position. They lay like that, side by side, breath sinking, pulses threading together. A single shared rhythm in the hush before bloodshed. Then, her voice, thin, breaking. "If you die tomorrow," she said, "my soul won't be whole anymore." His grip on her hand tightened. "I don't want to need you," she whispered. "I know. But I do." His throat worked. "Then let me live. Let me come back to you." She closed her eyes, lashes damp. "I don't know if I'm strong enough. I'll be strong enough for both of us." She turned toward him then, finally, and buried her face in his chest. He didn't pull her closer. He just let her rest there, on the place above his heart that still beat only for her. Outside, the wind shifted. The forest held its breath. And in the quiet cradle of the old cabin, two hearts made a promise without words, without vows, without binding teeth. Only touch. Only love. Chapter 20, The Blood Moon Duel. The moon hung red and swollen in the sky, ripe as a wound. It bled across the clearing, drenching the ancient stones of the moon shadow altar in the color of endings. Wolves lined the edges of the arena, their cloaks fluttering like torn banners in the wind. No one spoke. Not even the elders. They all waited for the blood to begin. Kala stood behind the carved circle that marked the dual boundary, her heart thrashing inside her ribs like a caged bird. Her fingers dug into the wooden railing, knuckles white. She could taste the air, iron and ash and pheromones wound too tight to breathe. Ronan stepped into the clearing. Not in ceremonial armor. Not cloaked in alpha splendor. Just him, bare-chested, the crescent scar over his collarbone pale against skin kissed by shadow and war. Silver eyes burning, but empty of triumph. He hadn't come to win. He had come to bleed. Across the ring, Varek smiled. Arrogant. Gleaming with the confidence of someone who believed fate bent beneath his heel. So he drawled, stepping forward like a predator at leisure, "You bring your heart to a knife fight." How poetic. Ronan didn't answer. His jaw clenched once. The elder at the altar raised her arm. By ancient law, the rite of alpha contest begins. You may fight for your claim. Death or submission ends the bond. The air snapped. Varek lunged. Ronan caught the blow, but not in time. The crack of bone echoed across the trees. His body skidded across the stone, blood already painting his side. He rose silently, not with fury, but with grief, and planted his feet. Already slow, Varek sneered. You've softened. Gutted by love like a lamb. Ronan didn't speak. He struck back. Not like a king reclaiming his throne, but like a wolf protecting the last thing that mattered. The clash of bodies, the snarl of jaws too close to skin, the fight was brutal, primal. Not clean. Not glorious. It was teeth and fury, sweat and torn earth. Varek had strength, but Ronan had desperation. Still, it wasn't enough. Kala's voice cracked the silence. Stop it. No one turned. She ran to the edge of the circle, screaming, You say this is about rights. About bonds. But I am not a possession. Her voice shattered across the trees. If I choose neither, does the law still hold? Does it matter what I want? The elders didn't answer. Because the truth was, it didn't. This was about legacy. About wolves who forgot that the moon did not just rule alphas. It ruled all. Ronan was on his knees. Blood poured from his side. His breathing was ragged. The earth beneath him was black with it. Varek circled like a vulture, grinning. You'll die for her. Ronan looked up, mouth bloody. I already have. Then he closed his eyes. And his soul howled. It was not a sound of fury, it was mourning. It was love laid bare and broken. It ripped through the clearing, a raw, ancient sound that called something buried deep in the roots of the forest. The stones trembled. The wolves stilled. And from Ronan's chest, something cracked open. A surge of scent, not dominance, not rage, but bond. The kind forged not in conquest, but in surrender. It roared across the clearing, brushing against Kala's skin like firelight. His eyes snapped open, silver flaring bright. He rose. Varek blinked, just once. And Ronan struck. Not with strength, but with soul. His claws slashed once, and Varek fell to the earth with a howl of disbelief, beaten not by might, but by meaning. Silence fell. The elders stood frozen. Ronan staggered, bloodied, breath catching in his throat. His gaze found Kala, only her. And then he collapsed. Kala screamed. She didn't care about the ring, the law, the elders. She ran to him, dropping to her knees beside his body. His skin was pale. His pulse, barely a flicker beneath her palm. No, she gasped. No, 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 no. He blinked up at her, blood on his lips. I told you. I would come back. Don't you dare leave, she choked, gripping his hand. Not now. Not after everything. His eyes fluttered shut. And still, his scent reached for hers. Faint. Broken. But trying. Her voice broke. I choose you, she whispered. I choose you, you stubborn, ruinous, beautiful alpha. And then, not waiting for rights or permission or anything else stolen from her, she leaned down and kissed him. Their scents met in a kiss more intimate than skin. Her pheromones unfurled like a ribbon of fire, melting into his. The bond trembled. Reached. matched. A surge of heat flooded the clearing, ancient and holy. The bond didn't ignite, it awoke. Ronan gasped. And Calla felt it, deep in her bones, her marrow, her soul. Not forced. Not fated. Chosen. His hand weakly gripped hers. His lips moved, barely audible. "You're mine." She kissed his temple. "And you're finally mine." The crowd watched, silent, not from fear, but reverence. The blood duel had ended. But something far older had begun. Chapter 21, The Price of the Bond. The scent of blood still clung to the air. It had seeped into the stones of the Moonshadow altar, into the moss at its base, into the very roots of the trees that stood as silent witnesses to what had just occurred. The duel was over. The blood moon had waned, retreating behind clouds like a breath finally exhaled. But Ronan Valere had not risen. He lay curled in himself at the altar's edge, a broken silhouette against the crumbling stone. His silver eyes, those eyes that once burned with dominance and storm, were closed. His breath came in shallow, halting pulls. The bond flare that had saved him from death had not saved him from unraveling. The elders stood in a tight semicircle behind the fallen Alpha, their faces stone-carved and still. Ronan Valere, spoke the first elder, voice stripped of emotion, is no longer Alpha of the Valere line. His body is broken, his bond unstable. The right of succession will be called. A murmur swept through the wolves gathered on the rise. But Calla heard none of it. She was already moving. Her bare feet splashed through shallow puddles of blood and rain. Her cloak slipped from her shoulders as she dropped to her knees beside him, not caring that her dress soaked through, not caring that her scent was breaking open again in waves she no longer tried to suppress. "Ronan," she whispered, touching his jaw. "Come back." His skin was clammy. His brow burned. And underneath the surface, she could feel it, the bond fraying at the edges, unraveling like silk too long pulled at both ends. Cora stood a few paces away, her silver braids limp with rain, watching with eyes that knew too much and yet never interfered. "You once fled this bond, child," Cora murmured, not cruelly. "Now you must decide if you will keep it." Calla brushed blood-matted hair from Ronan's face. Her voice was a thread. "I once thought this bond was a chain. Now I know it was a mirror." He didn't stir. She leaned closer, pressed her lips just above his ear. "You held back for me, that night. I know now. You could have taken everything. But you didn't. You burned instead." The tears came silently. "I used to think loving you would destroy me. But losing you, that's what would shatter me." She drew in a long, shaking breath. "I once ran from being yours. Now I will bring you back to me. Not because I'm bound by blood or law, but because I choose you." Calla lowered her mouth to his. The kiss was not desperate. Not a claiming. It was an invocation. Her lips moved gently over his, coaxing breath back into his lungs. And as she kissed him, she opened herself, not just emotionally, but physiologically. Her pheromones broke loose like a tide, rich and golden and unmistakably Omega. But this time, they carried no fear. They carried consent. And beneath her, something ancient stirred. The bond snapped taut. Not with pain. Not with violence. With recognition. A heat bloomed between them, not from arousal, but from soul. From essence. A silken web that wrapped around them both and pulled tight, not with force, but with certainty. The mark on Ronan's chest, faint since the interrupted bond, flared bright. He gasped. His eyes opened. And Calla watched the silver of them flood with light. "Calla," he rasped, voice frayed and smoke-torn. She smiled, tears spilling freely now. "Shoo. I've got you. I'm not running anymore." Ronan's hand reached for hers, clumsy, shaking, but warm. Real. Present. He looked at her the way dying men looked at heaven. "I heard you," he whispered. "In the dark." She pressed her forehead to his. "You were never in the dark alone." A soft glow surrounded them, phenomenal and almost supernatural, as if the forest itself bowed to the completion of something sacred. The elders looked on, many with unreadable expressions, some disapproving, some stunned, and a few reverent. For the first time in generations, a mate bond had not been taken, it had been given. Cora's voice finally broke the silence, old and deep and certain. She is chosen. And so has he. No law can undo what the soul seals. And the wolves felt it. In their blood. In their bones. The resonance of that bond spread like ripples through water, touching those closest to the circle, young wolves first, the ones too new to have forgotten choice. They gasped as their senses shivered. An awakening. Calla looked up at the council. Her hair hung wet around her face, her lips bruised from her kiss, her scent wild and beautiful. If you strip him of title, so be it, she said quietly. But I will not leave his side. Whether alpha or not, he is mine. And I am his. Ronan's hand squeezed hers, and his eyes never left her face. At the far edge of the gathering, one of the younger wolves, barely past first shift, fell to one knee, overcome by the shock of the resonance in his chest. Then another. And another. Cora watched the wave pass through them. A new bond form, she murmured. Born not of command, but communion. And far from the altar, where moonlight licked the treetops and old shadows began to tremble, something in the roots of Thorn Hollow cracked. Not from violence, but from the future. Chapter 22, The Storm After the Howl. The rain had stopped, but the storm was far from over. A hush blanketed the ruins of Thorn Hollow's council hall, where the old pillars stood like ghostly ribs of a fallen beast. The air still crackled with the echoes of the duel, the scent of iron, scorched earth, and something newer, sharper. A scent like rebirth. Calla stood at the edge of the altar stones, Ronan's weight against her shoulder, his arm slung over hers not from dominance, but necessity. He was walking now, barely, but he was awake. Alive. And every breath he took seemed to pull strength from her presence. They were still connected. Not by law. Not by force. By choice. The moment the bond had realigned, the air around them had changed. She'd felt it. Others had too. Now, as they descended the moss-covered stairs toward the clearing below, eyes followed them, not with fear, nor with the reverence reserved for alphas, but with something else. Curiosity. Unspoken yearning. Cora met them at the base, her robes damp with dew, the ends of her silver braids clinging to her shoulders. They feel it, don't they? Calla asked softly, watching the shifting bodies of the younger wolves gathered beneath the canopy of black pine. Cora nodded once. You've unmade the lie they were born into. Ronan's lips twitched a wry, bruised smile. That'll make us very popular. Calla didn't smile back. Her gaze swept the faces around them, some defiant, some uncertain, but most hopeful. It wasn't a revolution yet, but it was a tremor beneath the crust. The kind that broke things loose. A young wolf, barely past his second shift, stepped forward. His eyes were wide, breath hitching, as though drawn by something magnetic. You bonded, he said. But it didn't hurt. It didn't force. Calla met his gaze, steady. No, it didn't. Another stepped forward, then another. Young, unmarked wolves, most of them omegas or submissive betas. The kinds the old laws left voiceless. What did it feel like? The girl asked, her voice barely louder than the wind. Calla paused, then answered honestly. Like I'd stopped running from my own body, she said. Like my soul wasn't a battlefield anymore. A tremor passed through the group. Behind them, one of the council elders stirred. He looked aged beyond his years, the last of the old guard. His voice, though still firm, cracked around the edges. The bond was made without ritual, without decree. That makes it unstable. No, Cora interrupted, her voice low but sharp. It makes it sovereign. The elder flinched. Calla felt Ronan's grip tighten on her hand. It isn't just about me, she said, turning toward the crowd now. This is about you. All of you who've been told your bodies don't get to say yes or no. That your nature makes you property. That love must be survived, not chosen. The wind caught her hair, the pale strands lifting like thread from a spindle. I didn't survive the bond, she said, louder now. I forged it. On my own terms. There was a sound, half growl, half cry, from the trees beyond. A wolf collapsed to his knees, overcome with the weight of something deep and ancestral. His mate, a young male beta, rushed to his side, their eyes locking with a sudden understanding between them. A flicker of resonance danced on the air, not like dominance or submission, but like recognition. Cora inhaled slowly. It's starting. It was the thing they didn't yet have words for. Ronan called it resonance. Kala called it freedom. And the wolves, those who had known only chains, called it hope. By the time the sun began to dip behind the cliffs of Hollow's Edge, a crowd had formed by the old footbridge that once marked the border between the sacred and the mundane. Once, it had separated power from the powerless. Now, Kala and Ronan walked it together. She supported him still, but less so. The color had returned to his cheeks. His gait had steadied. The bond pulsing between them fed his strength like a vein of wildfire. And yet he didn't lean on it. He didn't use it to pull her forward. If anything, he let her lead. Halfway across the bridge, they stopped. Kala turned. Below, in the fading golden light, the outline of Julian's home sat quiet and still. He stood outside it, half shadowed by a bent willow, his arms crossed. Watching. He hadn't come closer. Hadn't interrupted. But he hadn't turned away either. Kala's throat tightened. She touched the carved railing, aged and splintered beneath her fingers. I loved him, she said quietly. I know, Ronan answered, no bitterness in his tone. I think, part of me always will. I know that too. She looked up at him. I'm not yours because you won, she said. I'm yours because I finally chose to stop being at war with my heart. He lifted her hand and kissed the inside of her wrist. And I'm yours, he said, because I finally understand love isn't about claiming. It's about surrender. Below, Julian stepped back into his house. The door didn't close. But it didn't need to. Kala exhaled slowly, her eyes never leaving the mountain's edge. Then she turned her back to the past and took the final steps forward. Across the bridge. Into whatever would come next. Chapter 23. The Council Breaks. The mountain winds were sharp that morning, carrying the scent of frost, of moss still clinging to stone, and the copper tang of old blood not yet scrubbed from memory. Kala walked with her shoulders squared, the wind tugging at the edges of her dark cloak, the bond at her spine a steady, silent thrum. Ronan walked beside her, no longer the alpha in title, yet no one dared walk before him. The old council hall sat like a gnarled wound in the cliffs, its doors heavy with centuries of judgment. Once, this place had decided fates in the name of tradition. Now, it was about to witness its own reckoning. Inside, the great stone table stretched like a scar across the circular chamber. Varek sat bound to the far wall, ankles shackled, wrists tied in iron laced with wolfsbane. Even beaten, he smiled like a king waiting to reclaim a throne. Kala ignored him. The core members of the Elder Circle sat at the table, their robes muted grays and deep blues, marked by sigils of power passed down through bloodlines. They'd been warned of what was coming. But warnings had never stopped the old guard from believing they could control what had already evolved beyond them. She stepped into the center of the ring, her amber eyes sweeping the faces of those who had once called her Omega. Property. Disgrace. Flight risk. She stood straight and let her voice ring out like cold steel over the stone. I am not here to request a verdict. I am here to declare one. A murmur surged through the chamber, but no one interrupted. Mate bonds are not contracts to be executed under law, she said. They are not trophies to be passed to the strongest bidder. They are not chains forged in the fires of a council's decree. She turned to the circle slowly, locking eyes with each elder as she spoke. They are choices. Or they are nothing. One of the elders, a narrow-faced male named Theros, rose stiffly. The law exists to preserve order. Without it, bonds would spiral into chaos. How do you propose we keep peace if every wolf begins believing they're free to choose against their instincts? Kala tilted her head, calm. You fear choice because it weakens your grip on control. She's right. Another voice rose, Elder Lyson, one of the oldest females, her braid looped around her neck like a symbol of things swallowed. The bond between Ronan Valere and this Omega. Calla, Ronan said, voice low and firm, stepping forward at last. She has a name. Speak it. Lyson inclined her head. The bond between Ronan and Calla reformed without ritual, without coercion. And yet it has awakened power not seen in generations. I felt it. Many of us did. Across the room, Varek chuckled. You're letting sympathy rewrite centuries. You let an Omega cry long enough, and suddenly your spine turns to ash. Calla didn't flinch. She turned to him, voice calm. Varek Alden, you lost your challenge not because you were weaker, but because you fought for dominance instead of devotion. You were never my mate. Not even in your dreams. A flicker of rage crossed his face, but she didn't give it time to bloom. She turned back to the elders. You told me once that alphas lead because they are the strongest. Then why are the strongest so afraid of giving omegas a choice? Silence. Cora stepped forward then, a quiet ghost at her side, her voice like wind over bone. We watched you, all of you, build a house from stone and call it sacred. But wolves were born to run, to love wild, not to sit obedient in cages with golden bars. Elder Theros stood again. If you seek to disband the council, then what remains? Ronan moved beside Calla, his voice quieter now, but no less powerful. I renounce the title of Alpha, he said. Gasps rose, but he continued. Not because I've lost strength, but because I've finally understood power means nothing if it's built on submission. Calla placed her hand in his. We propose a new way, she said. A way where bonds are formed by resonance, not rank. Where alphas do not rule and omegas do not kneel. Theros looked ready to stand again, but a younger elder, barely past her first century, spoke before him. And what would you call such a gathering? Calla smiled, her voice steady. A chorus. Not a chain. Half the room stirred. There were voices of protest, yes, but also others rising in hesitant agreement. The oldest laws had been written in blood. But perhaps not all blood was meant to bind. Cora stepped forward, one hand on Calla's shoulder. Let those who cling to the old laws keep them. But do not demand the rest of us die by them. And so the council broke, not in a single, shattering moment, but like a glacier finally cracking under the weight of spring. The conservatives gathered their robes and departed in silence, their power no longer feared but pitted. Others remained, not as rulers, but witnesses to the birth of something new. When they left the mountain hall, the air was cold, but Calla's chest burned with something she'd never known before. Not survival. Not safety. Sovereignty. She and Ronan stood at the cliff's edge as the sun burned low, dyeing the world in flame and shadow. We did it, she said softly. No, he said, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. You did. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. Not today. Today, they didn't need tears. They had each other. And the wild. Chapter 24, Our Own Kind of Wild. The mountain mist parted like a curtain before them. Calla stood at the edge of the world, or so it felt. Beneath her bare feet, the earth was warm with the sun's kiss, soft with moss that hadn't yet been trodden by old power or named by old mouths. Beyond the ridge, an untamed forest stretched endlessly, green and gold and glowing with morning dew. This place, Ronan said beside her, has no name in any tongue I know. She turned to him. His silver eyes were clearer than she'd seen in weeks, no longer burdened by the weight of legacies or laws. His hair ruffled in the wind, his scent calm, steady, unhidden. He wasn't wearing a cloak of authority. Just a simple shirt, worn leather around his wrists, and the mate mark glowing faintly on his throat like moonlight etched into skin. Calla exhaled, the air trembling in her lungs. Freedom always felt like something you had to flee toward. But today, it was waiting. Behind them, the mountain path curved down to where a dozen wolves stood, some still in human form, others shifted, all watching with wide eyes and cautious hope. The young, the cast out, the marked and the broken and the bold enough to believe something else could be born. Ronan stepped forward, reaching for her hand. "This land isn't claimed," he said, voice rough but reverent. "Not by blood, nor rank, nor law. If you want it, it's yours." Kella looked at him, then at the waiting earth. Then she dropped to her knees and pressed her palm flat into the soil. "I don't want to own it," she whispered. "I want to become it." The moment hung quiet, golden, almost holy. Cora stepped from the gathering then, her steps soft on the grass, silver braids tumbling like memory over her shoulders. She moved to Kalla's side, knelt beside her. "You've done what I never dared," Cora said, her voice wrapped in time. "You finished what I only began." Kalla looked up, tears glinting, but not falling. "You taught me to listen to my wild." Cora smiled. "And you taught it to speak." They stood, the three of them, and faced the waiting wolves. There were no trumpets, no anointing rites, no branded seals. Only Ronan's voice, low and sure, as he spoke the words neither Alpha nor Elder had ever dared. "This place is now the home of the Wild Soul Pact," he said. "For any who have been forgotten by the laws, broken by the rules, or made to believe that love must be earned with pain." He looked at Kella. "For any who want to build something wild and soft and sovereign." She stepped beside him, their fingers interlacing. "I am not your Alpha," she said. "I am not your Omega. I am only Kella. And I will walk with anyone who dares to write their own ending." Silence fell like snowfall. And then, from one of the younger wolves, a howl. It was shaky, a little off pitch, but it rose. Then another, and another, until the woods rang with voices not pleading, but proclaiming. Kalla didn't howl. She didn't need to. She simply turned toward the slope and walked, Ronan at her side, Cora behind them, the wolves following. They passed through sun-dappled trees, where the light played over bark like old songs rediscovered. They walked until the world grew quiet again. Until the wind no longer whispered what had been, but invited them to name what could be. They stopped by a river so clear it mirrored the sky, and there, on its banks, stood a cottage of rough-hewn wood and open doors. A place Ronan had built with his own hands. A roof stitched with his promises. A hearth carved with hope. Kalla stepped inside. The scent was already hers. Not because it was claimed, but because it had been offered. By nightfall, the others had scattered among the forest, claiming tents, stone hollows, and soft grasses. The Wild Soul Pact had no map, only a heartbeat. That evening, Kalla sat on the steps of the cabin, watching twilight drape its violet hush over the trees. Fireflies blinked like distant souls. Somewhere nearby, a pair of wolves played in the stream, their laughter threading through the dusk. Ronan sat beside her in silence. "You ever think," she said, "that freedom would look so still?" He didn't answer at first, just reached for her hand and pressed his lips to her knuckles. "It's not still," he murmured. "It's breathing." Kalla turned her head, studying his face in the firelight. "We don't belong to anyone." "No," he said. "But we belong with." She leaned into him, resting her cheek to his shoulder, the mark between them humming quiet and deep. No longer a wound. No longer a chain. A vow. She looked up toward the mountains they'd left behind, where stones still remembered blood, where law still clung to power like frost to root. Then she looked at the trees around her. The untamed. Her voice, when it came, was barely above a breath. "This is our kind of wild." Chapter 25, and she ran no more. The fire cracked open the sky. It was the kind of night stitched from stories, dark velvet overhead pierced by stars, the scent of pine and moss thick in the air, and 1,000 embers dancing like wild, weightless spirits around the circle of wolves gathered in the clearing. Kalla sat at the heart of it all, her knees drawn to her chest, palms warmed by the firelight. Around her, the Wild Soul Pact was alive. Laughter hummed in pockets of conversation, the rustle of shifting wolves and shy new voices forming something ancient and new. She had never felt more surrounded. and yet more herself. In her lap, a letter. Its paper was soft, worn at the edges from where her fingers had traced the folds again and again. The ink, delicate and precise, smelled faintly of herbs, Julian's scent. His handwriting curved like gentle thought. She opened it. Kella, I once thought loving you meant keeping you safe. I see now that it meant watching you run toward danger, toward truth, toward something only your wild heart could name. You are no longer the girl who ran. You are the woman who found where she was meant to stand. And for that, I am not grieving, I am proud. Thank you for letting me love you, even if it was not meant to be forever. Yours once, Julian. The last word trembled in the firelight like a breath not quite caught. Kella folded the letter with reverence and tucked it beside her, then rose. The murmurs quieted as she stepped closer to the flames, her amber eyes reflecting the fire's glow. All around her, the circle watched, the broken, the reborn, the ones who had followed a howl into freedom. She didn't speak loudly. She didn't need to. Her voice carried because it came from a place deeper than her throat. It came from the part of her soul she used to hide behind teeth and instinct and silence. Once, I thought freedom meant running, she said. Ronan stood at the edge of the circle, his gaze locked on her. Not claiming her. Just witnessing. Always witnessing. She looked at him. Then the others. I ran from cages, from names, from a bond one didn't understand. I thought to be free meant to belong to no one. She paused. The fire snapped, as if waiting. But I learned something, she continued. Freedom isn't the absence of connection. It's the courage to choose the one who sees you whole and never asks you to shrink. A quiet shudder moved through the crowd. She stepped from the flames then, toward Ronan. Toward the one who had never chased, only waited. The one who had burned with her, broken with her, but never looked away. And when she reached him, she didn't fall into his arms like surrender. She walked into them like return. Their kiss wasn't a claim, nor a declaration. It was a conversation of mouths and breath and memory. Her fingers threaded through his hair, his hand curved against the small of her back. Their scents mingled in quiet harmony, no longer clashing, no longer devouring. Just resonating. In the hush of their closeness, stars arched above them like witness. And when she finally pulled back, just enough to rest her forehead to his, she whispered into the space only the two of them would ever inhabit. I'm not afraid anymore. He smiled. Not with his mouth, but with his entire being. You never needed to be, he whispered back. That night, after the fire dimmed and the songs faded into the hush of sleep, Kella lay in the clearing with Ronan beside her, the sky a blanket of constellations above. No walls. No titles. No laws to split the wild from the woman. She looked at the wolves curled near trees, at young faces aglow with wonder. She thought of Cora's knowing smile. Of Julian's letter resting beneath her pillow. And then she looked at herself, no longer haunted, no longer running. She was not the Omega who had escaped a bond. She was the soul who had chosen her wild and loved the Alpha who had knelt before it. The wind whispered through the trees. And somewhere deep in the forest, a howl rose, not of hunger or rage, but of a soul who had found home and chose to stay. The end. And she ran no more.